Commander Vrakthos of the Zentari Empire stood on the bridge of his warship, the Eternal Talon, gazing at the primitive Earth cargo vessel through his viewport with what could only be described as aggressive disappointment. This was it? This battered metal box held together with spot welds and optimism? This was humanity's finest? Well, not their finest, obviously. Their finest were the ones who kept embarrassing his people in actual combat. But still, the Zentarii were the galaxy's premier warrior culture. Thank you very much. 3,000 years of honored combat traditions. Blade ceremonies passed down through 17 generations. Poetry written in the blood of worthy opponents, which sounded way more romantic in their native tongue. Trust me. And then humanity showed up. Oh, humans were new to the galactic stage. Barely 50 years since first contact. Still figuring out which end of a plasma rifle got hot. But somehow, these upstart primates kept winning battles. They had no business surviving. Ambushes, traps, something they called strategic retreating, which was clearly just running away with better PR. Cheaters, basically. Vrakthos's quad tusks ground together in frustration. His honor guard stood at attention behind him, their ceremonial armor gleaming, their own blades sheathed at their sides. Each blade was a masterwork, monomolecular edges, forged in zero-gravity foundries using fragments of collapsed stars. Sharper than the distinction between confidence and arrogance, which Vrakthos had never really grasped. These blades could slice through starship hulls. They could part atoms with a gentle swing. They were, objectively speaking, the most perfect cutting instruments in known space. The Zentarii had built their entire military doctrine around them, which in retrospect might have been putting too many eggs in one extremely sharp basket, but hindsight wasn't really their thing. "Hail the human vessel," Vrakthos commanded, his voice, carrying that theatrical boom all great warriors cultivated, usually in their 20s, after many hours of practice, alone. His communications officer, a younger Zentarii named Kresh, who was definitely going to get promoted after this glorious victory, tapped the console. The view screen flickered to life. A human face appeared. Tired eyes, 5 o'clock shadow, a coffee-stained shirt with a logo that read, Mars Station or Bust. This was Earth's champion? Yeah? The human said, mid-yawn. You're blocking my route, buddy. Got a schedule to keep. Vrakthos drew himself up to his full 7 feet of muscled, tusked magnificence. Human. I am Commander Vrakthos, First Blade of the Zentarii Empire, Keeper of the Eternal Honor, Slayer of the Gorthak Beast, winner of Cool. The human interrupted, glancing at something off-screen. Listen, I'm hauling frozen pizzas to Mars Station. They've got a very narrow temperature window. So if this is about a toll or something, I can file a complaint with the Transport Authority, but I really need to combat. I challenge you to single combat, Vrakthos roared, slamming his fist on the console for emphasis. It made a very satisfying boom. He'd practiced that too. The human blinked. You what now? Your species has disgraced the Zentarii in battle through cowardice and trickery. I will prove humanity's unworthiness by defeating your greatest warrior in honorable blade combat. Prepare yourself for... I'm a cargo pilot, man. I deliver stuff. You want a warrior? Maybe try the military? Vrakthos's eye twitched. This wasn't going according to the script. Usually, species trembled at this point. There was supposed to be trembling. You are human. You will fight. It is decided. He made a sharp gesture, and his pilot moved the Eternal Talon alongside the cargo ship. I am boarding your vessel. Prepare your finest blade. We duel in 1 standard cycle. 1 cycle is like an hour, right? The human sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that suggested he'd already filled out too much paperwork today. Fine, whatever. Bay doors on the port side. Try not to scratch the paint. I just got that buffed out. The screen went dark. Kresh looked at his commander with what might have been concern. Sir, he seemed very calm for someone about to face death. Vrakthos waved dismissively. Fear makes humans do strange things. I have studied their warriors. They face oblivion with humor, a coping mechanism. He drew his blade, the monomolecular edge catching the starlight and splitting it into a rainbow of deadly promise. But humor will not save him from the blade of ancestors. Today, the galaxy learns humanity is not special. They are simply lucky. His honor guard nodded in unison, a well-rehearsed gesture of agreement. None of them had ever seen a kitchen knife. Jake Ramsey was having a terrible week, and it was only Tuesday. Monday, his refrigeration unit had started making a noise that could only be described as mechanical screaming. He'd fixed it with duct tape and prayer. two of humanity's greatest technological contributions to the galaxy. Not that anyone gave us credit for either. This morning, Mars Station had messaged him to say they were hosting some kind of pizza party for a diplomatic delegation, which meant his cargo of frozen pepperonis was now apparently crucial to interstellar relations. No pressure. And now this. A 7-foot-tall alien warrior with more tusks than sense wanted to duel him over. What, military tactics? Jake hauled frozen foods. The closest he came to combat was arguing with customs agents about tariff classifications. The airlock hissed open. Commander Vrakthos entered like he was auditioning for a space opera, which, let's be honest, he probably was in his head. His armor gleamed. His honor guard flanked him in perfect formation. They moved like a synchronized swimming team, but for stabbing. Jake stood in the cargo bay, wearing his work coveralls and holding a coffee mug that said Universe's okayest pilot. He'd found it in a Mars gift shop. It was accurate. Human, Vrakthos began, his voice echoing off the metal walls. Yeah. We did the intros over the comm. Want some coffee? Jake gestured to the pot in the corner, which was definitely violating several safety regulations by existing near the fuel lines, but inspectors rarely checked this far out. Vrakthos stared at him. His honor guard stared at him. One of them whispered something that sounded like confused prayer. We are here for combat, Vrakthos said, louder this time, like volume would somehow make Jake care more. To the death. Right, the duel thing. Jake sipped his coffee. Quick question. If you kill me, who flies the ship? Because I'm the only one on board, and this thing doesn't have autopilot. Budget cuts. That is, not my concern. It's gonna be your concern when you're drifting in space surrounded by 2,000 frozen pizzas and no way to call for pickup. Jake checked his watch, which was actually his grandfather's watch, which was being a theme here apparently. Also, I've got insurance, but it specifically excludes acts of alien warfare. There's a subsection. I'd have to file paperwork for weeks. Vrakthos's tusks quivered with what might have been rage or confusion. Hard to tell with alien biology. You speak of insurance while facing your doom? I speak of insurance because I don't have PTO, and filling out death benefit forms from beyond the grave sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. Jake set his mug down on a crate labeled fragile, frozen goods, do not sit on. He sat on it. Look, Vrak. Thos? Can I call you Vrak? You may not. Vrak, buddy. I get it. Your people are all about honor and blade combat and warrior spirit. Very cool. Very aesthetic. But I've got a schedule, and you're currently costing me my on-time delivery bonus, which is actual money I use to buy actual food. He paused. Also to pay insurance. Premiums. Ironically. One of the honor guards leaned toward another. Is he attempting psychological warfare? I think he is simply like this, the other whispered back. Vrakthos planted his blade point down on the deck plating with a dramatic CLAing. You will fight, human, or I will consider your entire species cowards and report such to the Galactic Council. The same Galactic Council that keeps vetoing your invasion proposals? Vrakthos's eye twitched again. That was apparently classified information. Jake stood up with the energy of a man who'd already given up 3 hours ago. Fine. We'll do your duel. But we're doing it in here, because I'm not depressurizing the whole ship. And you've got 20 minutes, because that's when I need to make my trajectory adjustment, or I'll miss the Mars approach window. 20 minutes is more than sufficient to, and honestly, if you actually kill me, could you at least file the insurance claim? Form 2847B. There's copies in the cabinet. I've already filled out most of it. Vrakthos stared at this bizarre human who discussed his own death like it was a scheduling conflict. Where was the fear? The desperate pleading? The dramatic last words? This was supposed to be glorious combat, not administrative discussion. Prepare your blade, human, Vrakthos said, trying to salvage some dignity from this interaction. Let us see what pitiful weapon your species offers against Centauri perfection. Jake walked over to his tool locker, the one held shut with a bent screwdriver because the latch broke 6 months ago. He rummaged around past wrenches, a spare thruster coil, and what looked like half a sandwich. Where do you even keep your ceremonial weapons? One honor guard asked, genuinely curious. Next to my ceremonial give a crap, Jake muttered, which I seem to have misplaced. His hand closed around something familiar, something that had been with his family for longer than he'd been alive. He pulled out his knife. Grandmother's kitchen knife. Vrakthos's triumphant expression froze. This'll work, right? Jake said, holding up the worn, carbon steel blade with its loose handle and faded wooden grip. It's what I've got. The honor guard exchanged glances that suggested their whole schedule might need adjusting. The cargo bay had never been intended for mortal combat. It had been intended for boxes. Lots of boxes. Specifically, at this moment, boxes of frozen pizza that were stacked in precarious towers reaching toward the ceiling like the world's least impressive skyline. Jake kicked a crate of spare parts aside to clear some floor space. Watch the pizzas. I dent those boxes. I don't get paid. Vrakthos looked around the arena with barely concealed disappointment. This wasn't a grand coliseum. There were no cheering crowds, no dramatic lighting, just fluorescent tubes that flickered occasionally and made that annoying buzzing sound Jake kept meaning to fix. This is acceptable, Vrakthos lied. It was not acceptable. There wasn't even proper acoustics. His war cry would sound flat. His honor guard formed a loose perimeter, careful not to back into any frozen goods. One of them, a warrior named Thex, pulled out a recording device. This victory needed to be documented for the archives, also for the Zentarii equivalent of social media, where it would absolutely go viral. Vrakthos stepped into the cleared space and held his blade before him with both hands. Time for the pre-combat ceremony. He'd been practicing this speech for weeks. Behold, he intoned, his voice dropping into that resonant frequency all Zentarii warriors learned at the academy, usually taught by someone named Master Gravel Voice, who'd smoked too many victory cigars. The blade of ancestors, forged in the heart of the Krillix Nebula, where matter itself weeps at the touch of heat. Its edge is 1 molecule wide. 1 molecule. Do you comprehend this? That's pretty thin, Jake admitted, leaning against a pizza crate. Thin? Thin? Vrakthos was really getting into it now. This blade has ended 17 noble bloodlines. It has carved its name into the hull of the dreadnought Terminus. It has been passed down through 43 generations of warriors, each one proving their worth before even touching its handle. The forging process required the gravitational field of a neutron star and the tears of a Kelvorian monk. The monk cried into your sword? It was very sad. His monastery was closing. Vrakthos shook his head, getting back on track. The point is, human, this blade is perfection incarnate. It can slice through your ship's hull like paper. It has ended challenges before they began, simply by being drawn from its sheath. Other species surrender when they see its gleam. You stand before the pinnacle of bladed weapon technology in the known universe. He held it up. Starlight from the viewport caught the monomolecular edge. It didn't just reflect light, it seemed to cut it into component colors, each wavelength separating like the blade was performing spectroscopy just by existing. It was, objectively, gorgeous, a masterpiece. The kind of weapon songs were written about, usually in minor keys. Cool, Jake said. He held up his grandmother's kitchen knife. This is Grandma Phyllis's knife. Got it at a hardware store in Ohio in 1987. Cost about $15. Had it sharpened twice. The honor guard stared in collective horror. The knife was not impressive. The blade was maybe 8 inches of carbon steel, worn from decades of use. The edge was sharp enough, sure, but it had that slightly uneven look of something that had been honed by hand too many times on too many different surfaces. The handle was wood, actual wood, and it wobbled when Jake gripped it. That is your weapon? Vrakthos's voice cracked slightly. Yep, Grandma used it for everything. Chopping vegetables, cutting rope, opening paint cans, which you're not supposed to do but she didn't care. Once she fended off a raccoon that got into the garbage. A raccoon. Trash panda. Angry little guy. This knife won. Jake tested the grip, tightening his fingers around the loose handle. She left it to me when she passed. Said it was the best knife she ever owned because it never quit on her. Not fancy, but it works. Thex whispered to another guard. Is this psychological warfare? Making us lower our guard with tales of grandmothers? I think he genuinely brought a kitchen utensil to a death match, the other whispered back. Vrakthos felt something he rarely experienced. Uncertainty. This human was either the bravest warrior he'd ever faced or the stupidest, and he genuinely couldn't tell which. The line between courage and idiocy was apparently also 1 molecule wide. That blade cannot possibly stand against Zentarii craftsmanship, Vrakthos said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as Jake. Probably not, Jake agreed. But you're blocking my shipping lane. My pizzas are gonna thaw if we don't hurry this up, and this is literally all I've got. So let's do this thing, yeah? I've got a trajectory burn in 18 minutes. Vrakthos raised his perfect, legendary, impossibly sharp blade, forged in the heart of a nebula with the tears of a sad monk. Jake raised his dead grandmother's $15 kitchen knife with the wobbly handle. The honor guard held their breath. Somewhere in the cargo hold, a frozen pizza shifted slightly as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. "For the honor of the Zentarii Empire," Vrakthos declared. "For my on-time delivery bonus," Jake muttered. They stepped toward each other. The universe, as it turned out, had a sense of humor about these things. Vrakthos moved first, because of course he did. Warriors always moved first. It was in the manual. Chapter 3, right after dramatic entrances, and before accepting surrender with grace. He executed a ceremonial strike called the Falling Star, which involved raising his blade overhead with both hands and bringing it down in a perfect arc that was supposed to cleave his opponent from crown to sternum. It looked fantastic. 10 out of 10 for style. Jake, who had never read the warrior manual and wouldn't have cared if he had, did what any reasonable person holding a kitchen knife would do when a 7-foot alien tried to split him in half. He blocked. Not gracefully. Not with proper form. He just brought Grandma Phyllis's knife up in a panicked diagonal because that seemed like the direction that might prevent death. The Blade of Ancestors met the $15 hardware store special. And shattered. Not chipped. Not notched. Shattered. Like glass. Like ceramic. Like all those fancy coffee mugs that say, "hand wash only," that you put in the dishwasher anyway and immediately regret. The monomolecular edge, 1 molecule wide, forged in nebulas and tears, and 43 generations of warrior tradition, exploded into approximately 700 pieces of very sharp confetti. The sound was less of a dramatic clang, and more of a crystalline tinkle, like a chandelier having a nervous breakdown. Time stopped. Jake stood there, his grandmother's knife completely intact, not even a scratch on it, still wobbling slightly in his grip because the handle was loose. Vrakthos stood there, holding about 3 inches of blade still attached to an ornate handle that suddenly looked very silly without the dangerous bit. The honor guards stood there, their mouths open in shapes that defied their species' normal facial structure. One piece of the shattered blade tinkled as it hit the deck plating. Then another. The silence between each tiny impact was deafening. Jake said, which was about all his brain could manage. "That's not," Vrakthos whispered, staring at his broken blade like it had personally betrayed him. Which, to be fair, it had. "That's not possible. Did your sword just explode?" "It did." "Not explode!" Vrakthos roared, though the evidence scattered across the cargo bay suggested otherwise. "The Blade of Ancestors is unbreakable. It has ended 17 bloodlines. It has carved dreadnoughts. It's in like a million pieces on my floor, dude." One of the honor guards, Thex, knelt down and picked up a fragment. He held it up to the light, examining it with the confusion of a man whose entire worldview was currently being shredded even faster than the blade had been. "Commander," Thex said slowly, "I believe I understand what happened." "Explain," Vrakthos demanded, still gripping his fancy handle attached to nothing. "Explain how the pinnacle of Zentari weapon craftsmanship was defeated by a kitchen implement." Thex cleared his throat. "The Blade of Ancestors has a monomolecular edge. This makes it extraordinarily sharp. It can slice through almost any material because it concentrates force on a single molecule width." "Yes, I know this. I gave the speech. However, Commander, a monomolecular edge is also extraordinarily brittle." Thex held up the fragment. "All that sharpness requires a very specific crystalline structure, perfect for slicing, catastrophic under impact stress." The other guards were nodding now, having similar revelations. One pulled out a datapad and started doing calculations. Probably math that would make him very sad. "The human's blade," Thex continued, gesturing at Grandma Phyllis's knife, still intact in Jake's confused grip, "is made of simple carbon steel, not particularly sharp by our standards, but flexible, durable, designed to withstand impact, torsion, decades of abuse. It's a cheap knife," Jake offered, trying to be helpful. "It's a functional knife," Thex corrected. "Our blade was designed for ceremonial strikes, clean cuts. Elegant combat where blades slide past each other like a deadly dance." He looked at his commander. "We forgot that in real combat, sometimes metal hits metal directly, with a force." Vrakthos stared at the 3 inches of blade still in his hand. His eye twitched, then twitched again. The twitching was becoming rhythmic. "Our entire military philosophy," he said quietly, "is based on blade supremacy." "Yes, sir. We have built our society, our honor code, our tactical doctrine around the superiority of the Blade of Ancestors." "Yes, sir. And it just lost to a utensil from Ohio." Yes, sir. Another piece of the shattered blade tinkled onto the deck. It sounded like the death of empires, but smaller and more embarrassing. Jake looked at his knife, then at the devastated aliens, then back at his knife. So, is the duel over? Because I really do have that trajectory burn coming up and… How? Vrakthos interrupted, his voice somewhere between a roar and a whimper. How has your species not conquered the galaxy with these indestructible weapons? It's just a knife, man. We have like billions of them. Most people have a whole drawer full. Jake shrugged. They're for cooking, sometimes opening packages. My buddy Dave used his to strip wire once, which you're definitely not supposed to do, but it worked fine. A drawer full, Vrakthos repeated numbly. Billions. I mean, yeah, they're cheap. Last forever if you take care of them. Grandma had this one for like 40 years. Used it almost every day. Still cuts great. The honor guard exchanged looks that suggested several strongly worded reports would be filed with their superiors upon returning home. Thex was still doing calculations on his datapad. Commander, according to material stress analysis, a standard Earth kitchen knife has a durability index approximately 70 times higher than our ceremonial blades under impact conditions. Stop talking. And the human mentioned they have billions of AI said stop talking. Jake checked his watch. So, listen, I don't mean to be rude during your existential crisis, but I've got 15 minutes before I miss my window. Are we good here? Vrakthos looked at him. Really looked at him. At this human in his coffee-stained shirt, holding his grandmother's indestructible kitchen knife, standing in a cargo bay full of frozen pizzas, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd just shattered 3,000 years of warrior tradition. We are good, Vrakthos said, defeated. We are very, very good. Cool. Do you guys need help cleaning up the sword pieces? I've got a vacuum somewhere. Vrakthos sat on a crate of frozen pizzas, which would have mortified him an hour ago but now seemed perfectly appropriate given how his entire life had unraveled. His honor guard stood around awkwardly, unsure what the protocol was for Commander has emotional breakdown in human cargo bay. Jake had made them all coffee. They drank it suspiciously, but they drank it. I don't understand, Vrakthos said, cradling his mug like it might also betray him. Your blade is crude, simple, mass-produced. How does it survive what ours cannot? Jake leaned against the wall, still holding Grandma's knife because putting it away felt rude at this point. It's made to work, not to impress people. Grandma used this thing every single day for 40 years. Chopped vegetables, butchered chickens, opened tin cans when she couldn't find the can opener, which was often because Grandpa kept putting it in the wrong drawer. But it has no artistry, no elegance. No, it's got something better, reliability. Jake turned the knife over in his hand. See, your blade was perfect for exactly one thing. Slicing in ideal conditions, ceremony, looking cool. But Grandma's knife? She dropped it, dishwashed it even though you're not supposed to. Used it to pry open paint cans. Once she threw it at a raccoon. You mentioned the raccoon, Thex said, taking notes now. Got him right in the trash can. Scared him off good. Jake smiled at the memory. Point is, this knife was designed for reality. Your blade was designed for a fantasy of combat where everything goes perfect. But nothing ever goes perfect, especially not in a fight. Vrakthos processed this. His entire species had spent millennia perfecting ceremonial combat, creating weapons so specialized they'd become fragile. Meanwhile, humanity made tools for Tuesday. Your military equipment? He said slowly, a horrible realization dawning. It's all like this, isn't it? Pretty much. Built to take a beating and keep working. Not fancy, just functional. Another honor guard spoke up. This explains why human fighters survive damage that would cripple our vessels. We assumed inferior design, but you're not building for elegance. We're building for when everything goes wrong, Jake confirmed. Which, in my experience, is most of the time. Vrakthos stared into his coffee. It was terrible coffee, honestly. But it worked. It provided caffeine and heat, which was its job. No ceremony required. We have been doing this wrong, he said quietly. Little bit, yeah. The entire Zentari warrior tradition is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes a weapon effective. I mean, your sword looked really cool before it exploded. Vrakthos set his coffee down and stood, some of his dignity returning. Human, Jake Ramsey. You have taught me more in 20 minutes than 40 years of warrior academy. This is deeply humiliating. Sorry? Do not apologize. Humiliation is useful. It means there is room for improvement. He looked at his honor guard. We will report these findings to the military council. Perhaps our entire strategic doctrine requires reevaluation. That sounds like a lot of paperwork, Jake said sympathetically. It will be, but necessary. Vrakthos picked up one shard of his shattered blade, examining it. We made weapons for glory. You made weapons to survive. And in the end, survival matters more than glory. Can I get that on a coffee mug? Despite everything, Vrakthos laughed. It sounded rusty, like he didn't do it often. Your species is going to be very troublesome for the galaxy, aren't you? We mostly just want to deliver our pizzas on time, honestly. Somehow, Vrakthos said, that makes you more terrifying. 3 months later, Jake was hauling routine cargo to Saturn Station when his comm panel lit up with a priority message from Earth Defense Command. He stared at it suspiciously. Priority messages meant paperwork, and he'd filled his lifetime quota after the Vrakthos incident. He opened it anyway. Mr. Ramsey, the admiral on screen said, way too cheerful for military brass. I'm pleased to inform you that you've been awarded the Stellar Service Commendation for contributions to interspecies relations. Jake blinked. I hit an alien sword with a kitchen knife. Yes, and apparently that's caused quite the diplomatic situation. The admiral grinned. Commander Vrakthos has become something of an ambassador. He's traveling the galaxy telling everyone about Earth's terrifying practical engineering. 3 species have withdrawn invasion proposals. 2 more are requesting trade agreements for kitchen supplies. You're kidding. Wish I was. The Zentarii Military Academy has added a whole semester on human pragmatic design philosophy. Vrakthos teaches it personally. His lectures are very popular, apparently. The admiral leaned forward. Between you and me, you've made humanity look way more dangerous than we actually are. Please don't tell anyone we mostly just improvise and hope for the best. That's literally what I told him we do. I know. That's what scares them. The commendation arrived 2 weeks later, an official plaque that Jake mounted on his cargo bay wall right next to the display case. The display case had been Vrakthos's idea, actually. He'd sent it as a gift, along with a very formal letter suggesting that Grandma Phyllis's knife deserved honored placement as a symbol of Earth's warrior spirit. Jake had mounted the knife inside with a small label that read, Grandma's knife, still works. Below it, he'd added the shards of the blade of ancestors that Vrakthos had insisted he keep. They caught the light beautifully, sparkling like the galaxy's most expensive mistake. Word spread fast in the cosmic community, the way embarrassing stories always do. At a trading post near Jupiter, Jake overheard a Kelvorian merchant telling another alien, don't mess with humans. Their simplest tools destroyed the Zentarii's greatest weapon. Imagine what their actual military has. Jake didn't correct him. Let them think Earth had super weapons. Better than admitting the truth, which was that humanity's greatest advantage was building stuff that worked when you dropped it. His communicator buzzed. A message from Vrakthos, who'd apparently added Jake to his contacts despite Jake never asking for this. Friend Jake. Am lecturing on Proxima Station next month about the philosophy of functional durability. We'll discuss your grandmother's knife and the raccoon incident. Hope this is acceptable. The students are very engaged. Several have requested Earth utensils for study. Also, how are the frozen pizzas? Jake smiled and typed back. Pizzas are fine. Knife's still cutting. Good luck with the lectures. Try not to let your students know we're mostly just winging it out here. That is precisely what I am teaching them to fear. Fair enough. 6 months after that, the Galactic Council officially classified humanity as a Level 4 civilization, which apparently meant, don't invade them. They're weird and their stuff doesn't break. The classification report specifically mentioned kitchen knives, duct tape, and something called percussive maintenance that humans used to fix broken equipment by hitting it until it worked again. Jake read the report while drinking terrible coffee from his universe's okayest pilot mug. The mug had survived 4 drops, 2 spacewalks, and an incident with a cargo crane that he didn't like to talk about. The report concluded with a recommendation that became somewhat famous in diplomatic circles. Human technology operates on principles that appear primitive until directly compared to more advanced systems, at which point the advanced systems typically fail first. Approach with caution and respect. They build things that last. Jake set the report aside and looked at Grandma's knife in its display case, still ready to use if he needed it, which he did occasionally, usually for opening particularly stubborn food packaging. The galaxy thought humanity was terrifying because we made indestructible weapons. The truth was simpler and somehow funnier. We just made stuff that worked on Mondays. Apparently, in a universe full of species that built for perfection, building for good enough to survive Tuesday was revolutionary. Grandma Phyllis would have loved that. She'd always said fancy things break first, cheap things last forever, and raccoons respect nothing but determination. Turns out she wasn't just talking about Earth. Jake fired up his engines for the next delivery run. Mars Station needed industrial lubricant, which wasn't glamorous but paid well. The engine sputtered twice before catching, which was normal. The refrigeration unit made that screaming sound again, which he'd fix with duct tape later. Everything worked just well enough, just like always. And somewhere out there, the galaxy's warrior cultures were re-evaluating 3,000 years of tradition because of a $15 knife from Ohio. Humanity's true superpower, Jake thought, wasn't advanced technology or military genius. It was building crap that refused to quit, maintained by people too stubborn to admit when something should be broken, held together with spare parts and spite. The Zentarii had their ceremony. The Kelvorians had their elegance. The Morphids had their bioengineering. Humanity had Grandma's knife. And that, apparently, was enough to make the whole galaxy nervous. Jake smiled, engaged the autopilot that only worked 70% of the time, and started filling out his delivery manifest. Just another Tuesday in space. And Tuesday, as Grandma always said, was when you found out what actually worked.